Hey guys, welcome back to my Ableton journal. Have you ever opened Ableton and realized that you have literally no idea of where to start, what kind of sounds you're looking for, or what to do next? That's basically what you're going to be watching here today. This is a recording of myself as I start a dub techno sketch from nothing in real time. And I'm going to walk you through what's going on inside of my head as I try out a bunch of things and try and find some inspiration. And of course, this isn't going to be a super polished step-by-step tutorial like I tend to try and do. Think of it more like you're in the studio with me, you're looking over my shoulder to see how I deal with that no inspiration feeling and still be able to walk away with a sketch that I'm happy with and that I can continue working on for my next session. So here I am starting from my usual dub techno leaning template. I've got the kind of kicks, delays and reverbs that I tend to use most in this style, which makes it really easy for me because I don't really have to think about building a setup from scratch every time I open a new project. The goal at this stage is just to get a simple loop going. At this point, I have also pre-mapped the velocity of the kicks to only affect the filter cutoff of each kick, and I've disabled the volume automation that normally follows the velocity. I did also place a simple delay on top of the kick and the drum bus, just for me to easily add some kind of extra movement to get some more rhythms here to play with. Also at this point I duplicate my 1-bar loops so that I can program in a couple of small changes here and there, and this is just to make it a bit more interesting. And once I have a kick and bass groove that I'm happy with, I'll just move on to snares and I'll start exploring the different snare sounds that I've loaded into this drum rack. And you'll see me just auditioning a couple of different snares until I find one that I'm happy with. And what you'll see next is I'll go over to my one delay send and I'll send the outcoming signal of that channel back into a spring reverb just to create even more movement and even more depth. Regarding the hi-hats, I initially did intend to try and make a bit of an interesting pattern, and you'll see me go back and forth with changing the starting time of this clip, moving the notes around and just trying out a couple of variations. And I couldn't really find anything that I felt fit, so I'll end up just with a simple 4 to the floor hi-hat. And once that feels okay, I go over to the chords and I just start bringing in some notes. I am using a sampler that's loaded with a couple of stabs that I've collected over the last couple of months. And I'm really not overthinking harmony or chord selection here. I just want something that sparks some inspiration. At this point, I do hope it's really clear for you why it's important to have a couple of high quality, nice sounding reverbs and delays on your synths. Because at this point, like, what am I doing? I'm using one synth stab and I'm just feeding it into a long plate delay. And it already sounds pretty nice to my ears. Alright, the idea here is just to create a bit of atmosphere and rhythmic scaffolding that I can react to. I'm not looking for any kind of finished sound or progression at this point. So now at this point, I'm ready to move forward. What you see me doing here is just trying to figure out what the name of the stab is and dig it out from my sample collection. And next we're going to throw that into one instance of Granulator. And now for the next 5 to 6 minutes, I go out on what I would call a thin ice. The point here, though, is to invite happy accidents. I want a bit of randomness, but not like total chaos. So I'm just gonna be tweaking a bunch of knobs without knowing what I'm doing, while at the same time just listening for those moments where the texture or like the delays or whatever suddenly feels musical, and it will remind me of something, or it will give me an inspiration to know what to do next. This process that I'm going through right now, it's meant to be chaotic. This is meant to sound like shit. I view this as just taking a bunch of colors and then just chucking it on the canvas and see what I like. At this point, I was getting some results that I really liked. I really liked that kind of reverse effect. And I think for the most part, I was trying to look for this one parameter that will reverse the grains individually. At this point, I was getting pretty tired of hearing that same minor chord over and over and over. So to just add some more variation for my own sake, I added a simple auto filter with a slow LFO on top. Alright, so at this point I finally started feeling that there was something in the sound that I wanted to record. I set up an audio channel for me to record it into, and I go back to the first chord sound. I add one instance of Crystallizer simply because I wanted more bass out of the sound. Honestly, looking back at this recording is making it very clear for me that my creative process is quite scattered, and I do advise you to try and tackle one thing at a time. That being said, if you know exactly what kind of sound you're going for, it won't necessarily break your flow too much if you get sidetracked like this. Finally, I end up going back to the Granulator channel and I start recording a longer pass of that sound while simultaneously tweaking parameters. After that long take, I like to dig through the recording to see if there's any sections that feel special. I'll loop short bits, I'll move the start point around, and I just try and see if there's anything that really sticks out or if there's any of these parts that feel special to me. Next, you'll see me throw that recording back into Granulator to further just try and resample whatever has come out of that initial recording and just repeat the process.
And next, I'm just further tweaking that sound. And at this point, I do remember that I was really starting to find the kind of sound that I liked, and that was inspiring me to just explore that further and see where that would take me. So then I do another pass of resampling, while as always just tweaking parameters, just seeing what fits, adjusting my OTT a bit, enabling the delay all over again. Basically just experimenting and see what comes out of it. At this point in time, I was getting pretty close to reaching my 20-minute limit. At the same time, it was this texture that I did end up liking the most out of this entire process. Here you just see me tweaking the so-called auto gate, which just gives me this nice little texture, and I'll end up chucking a delay on here because I was thinking, you know what, this is good enough for 20 minutes of pure chaos. At this point in the video, we can definitely tell that I am getting close to my 20-minute time limit. I've still only got a really simple groove, one chord, but I at least have one textural element that I'm pretty excited about. And for me, that's more than enough to call this a good session. At this point, I normally like to stop what I'm doing. I'll step away from the computer, go into a different room. I'll be gone for like 5 to 10 minutes and then come back and listen with fresh ears. Doing it like that makes it much easier for me to hear what's actually good and what was just me getting lost in tweaking knobs and delays. So to summarize, like if you're stuck and you don't know where to start, this is basically the recipe I fall back on. I use a template, I get a simple beat going, I throw a chord into some dub style effects, and then I wander out onto thin ice with a granulator and resample that a whole lot. You don't need one finished track in one sitting. What you need is just one or two elements that makes you think, yes, there's something here. And that's enough to pick up from the next time. Alright, so if this video helped you out or has left you feeling just a bit more inspired, I would be really grateful if you could give me a simple thumbs up. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll reply as soon as I see your comment. Thanks a lot for watching and I'll see you in the next video.